So, Brandon, how are you doing today?
Excellent. How are you, Gavin?
I can't complain. Can't complain. Just watching the markets roll out. I suppose I could complain about not sticking around in the Nasdaq short there, but we're still watching that for possible re-entry. I guess what we'll do, Brandon, is kind of start this the way we usually do, and that's talking about some of your thoughts in the markets. I know people get a lot of my ideas out there, but kind of curious to see what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm kind of feel like a little bit of a mixed bag of emotions these days. It's like, am I bullish or bearish? It's like, well, am I looking at the Dow or the Nasdaq? So,
Right.
obviously, quite the rotation out there. Obviously, a lot of the usual traders that I watch on a regular basis are kind of in the red here, and then you got things like, a good old, I don't know, like Caterpillar, up 4% as, Micron, which I've been watching closely today, down 2.25. So, I think overall, and I've kind of been saying this in and out of my morning notes for the last couple weeks. I mean, I think just overall, there's a lot of great trades on both sides of the table. So, kind of just focusing on the setups more than the overall market. And, it can get a little tricky sometimes trying to figure out, whether today's going to be a rotation or a tech day. So, you got to kind of observe for the, first 30 an hour or whatever it might be. And, just trying to come into each day with a few different ideas, kind of a smorgasbord, really, I guess, of some of the rotation names, maybe some of the tech names to short, and just trying to see which way the market takes me each day.
So I know that you like to kind of keep things in terms of you're focusing on puts, you're focusing on calls, and try not to get too in between, caught in between the two. So are you looking at calls more on the small cap side, or are you looking at puts on the tech, or is this one of those instances where you're kind of willing to play both sides?
This is one of the instances where I'm definitely willing to play both sides. Again, just a function of I think there's just been a lot of really great put setups out there, and frankly, for me, just with how each one of my days has gone for the past, several years, I'd probably just feel a little bit more comfortable with how a stock like a Micron trades versus a Caterpillar. Again, a great move. I just, have traded Caterpillar a handful of times versus something like a Micron. So, just kind of what I'm a little bit more comfortable with. If I can go and pick up a nice Micron put trade versus trading something I'm less familiar with, I'd kind of prefer to do that a little bit in this market environment.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. Stick to what you know and have a little bit of a better understanding of the movements because the broader market movements are certainly a little bit more confusing out there. I would agree with that. So moving forward, what are some of the things that you're looking at? I mean, are you following? I know that you kind of were talking a little bit about the uncertainty there and being willing to play both sides. Is there anything that would trigger you to look a little bit more on the call side or on the put side for that matter?
I think I saw you post earlier about the NQs potentially testing that 20 day. That's kind of what I'm ramping up for at this point. I think we've been in such a bullish market that I would imagine at an area like that we'd see a bounce. Obviously, a few geopolitical headlines and things hanging around out there, so maybe that changes it. But if we started dipping around to those levels, you've got some stocks like a Meta coming in at this morning that was kind of playing around the 50-day area. If you start to see some more of the big names kind of reach some of those levels, probably would start to think a little bit more on the call side.
Okay, so yeah, still keeping a close eye out on those names. Um, so Meta was one that you talked about. I know Google is another one. that you follow pretty closely? And any of the Amazon is one that you've definitely been commenting on as of late. Is there anyone that's sticking out above the others as a play that you like here?
Yeah, I mean, the Amazon coming in today, I mean, it's obviously had a little bit of a fade there, but I was kind of looking at that one coming in today, and, they've got Prime Day going on. We'll see if we get any headlines out of that. That one was kind of intriguing me a little bit, where you kind of had that everybody watching that 200 level. You get that little pullback to the 20-day. Kind of felt like if we saw some strength in tech, that one might see a bounce, and it did. Definitely saw a nice move this morning, but unfortunately, the indexes have kind of just taken back over and pushed that one lower.
All right, so we'll keep eyes out on these. So let's talk a little bit about some of the names that you have been mentioning here, Brandon, as of late, just ones that have been on your watch list. Costco, COST, being one of them, of course.
Yeah, so
Um,
Costco,
yeah.
yeah, it's all just again, just keeping some of the other name. I actually usually have this one on my radar, and obviously with some of these rotations, and finally made a pretty big move down after a very very impressive run. I think long term this stock's still a winner, but had it on my radar for potential further weakness, and yeah, just saw a descending triangle forming on the chart. So again, just kind of starting with names that I like, and as I flip through all these charts throughout the day, just start to notice some of these patterns. So, yeah, it's been forming a descending triangle here for a while, kind of just consolidating. Currently, yeah, I don't want to jinx myself, but currently kind of dipping below the bottom of the triangle, which is what we'd want to see, and kind of just hoping for some big selling volume to kick in and really bring the pattern to fruition.
All right. And this would be another one, I suppose, that 50-day moving average would intrigue you on it for a possible bounce if we got that flush.
I would think so, yeah. Again, there's a lot going on these days, and we'll see if rotations and sectors where they stand at the time. But just looking at that company and how strong of a chart it's been, I would imagine that the 50-day would be at least worth watching for a bounce if it does get that low.
Okay. So next up, Enphase. Obviously, those solar names have been pretty volatile out here. I mean, both geopolitics factoring in as well as rates. So Enphase, though, that's one's on the daily nice little flag pattern up here above the 250-day moving average, just starting to kind of coil around this. So I'd be curious as to your interpretation of this Enphase chart.
Yeah, so Enphase saw this morning, and again, I posted it. Just had a kind of a really small descending triangle on it. It was in the red, while tan was in the green. So, kind of one of those where if the sector and the market started to pull back, that thought it might just be a little intriguing for a short-term trade, and it actually started to come to fruition, and that became a total head fake. And yeah, kind of like you were just saying. I mean, it has just ripped higher from the 111 area. I think if you had asked me at the time it started ripping higher, if I thought it was going to do that after some of the headlines you just mentioned, I probably would have said no.
Yeah.
Just being very
Yeah, I
honest
mean,
with you on
it
that one.
was setting up as a reversal candidate for sure, right? I mean, just popping above the 50 and then coming crash back down below the 200. It did close above the 200 yesterday, though, didn't it?
Let me just see here real quick.
Closed at 113.06, and I got the 200 at 112.72.
Yeah, just barely, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, these solar stocks, as we talked about before, they can get a little whippy and a little volatile. So fun to catch those nice moves. But yeah, again, if you had asked me for my top trade idea when that thing hit 111, it would not have been to go long end phase. I will fully admit that one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So, what would you look at going forward here, Brandon, and which way you're leaning on it?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was kind of leaning back towards the put side in light of some of those events that you mentioned. But if it pushes higher here and closes towards the highs of the day, with the market, if it kind of keeps pushing lower here, that would probably intrigue me to go long to the 120-ish area. Because yeah, like you said, I mean, you kind of got that V-shaped recovery, a little coiling, a little bit of a flag pattern there, and if it can get a little bit more momentum there, should push it up towards the 120 area.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll keep an eye out on end phase there. Zscaler, cybersecurity play. Um, that's also on your radar here. Z ticker symbol ZS, of course. Keeping an eye out on this, holding above that 200-day moving average. Just saw the inversion of the 10-day crossing over the 200 there about a week ago. Now that's trying to set up as some support right around that psychological 200 area. So, what's in the Z scaler that you're watching, and which way you're leaning on it?
Yeah, so cybersecurity, and I put this in my notes a couple times. It's kind of thrown me for a little bit of a loop over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. Some of the days where some other tech was really ripping higher. You had things like CrowdStrike and Palo Alto, down a couple percent. But entered into the week kind of thinking, all right, if tech is going to continue on higher, I think this sector might need to step in and do a little bit of the lifting. And yeah, I looked at Zscaler entering into the week, and it had just been kind of consolidating and testing that 203 area for a few trading sessions. And I was kind of looking at that. I was like, well, it has held up pretty well as some of the other names in the sector moved down. So if the sector made a move higher, this might be a little bit of a better candidate to move higher. So I actually got a pretty nice little move yesterday, but again, got a little bit of a fade with the rest of the market, and I think this is just still worth watching around the 203 area. I mean, we're now looking at what, 6, 7 days worth of consolidation around a particular level, and I would imagine if it can get over that, we'd be looking at a move to like the 210 area.
Okay. 210, I like that call. Obviously, a little breakout from this flag pattern that we'd have going on here. So, um, we will keep an eye out on ZS. Amazon, that's one that has been talked a lot about in the chat room there. AMZN is battling with that 200 psych for the longest time. Finally fell back below and now sitting on the 20-day moving average. So, what's your thoughts on Amazon here, Brandon?
Yeah, that was a somewhat rather obnoxious breakout attempt over 200.
Right?
So I think that
Long and
one,
drawn out for sure.
yeah, I think that one kind of annoyed me and probably everybody on this call. So yeah, I mean, again, like I said, I was kind of intrigued as maybe a pullback long candidate as it kind of closed around the 20-day yesterday. So thought that was interesting. I mean, at this point, I kind of need to see what this day looks like. I mean, that's looking like my near maribouza candle of just kind of opening, and it has just been on a fade the whole day, back below the 20-day, and looks like it's gonna engulf all of yesterday. So I don't know. You got to maybe put an asterisk on this one, I guess, with Prime Day going on, that we could get some sort of headline or update. So, maybe a little bit of a game on the move lower, but just from a chart perspective, starting to look a little bit more vulnerable as it moves below that 20-day again.
Okay, now I'd be curious because just looking at that candle on the daily, you see my charts up, right, Brandon?
Just flip over. I was in Thinkorswim. Yep, looking at it.
All right, so see what I'm circling here on the 24th of June.
Yep.
Very similar charts, right? So now this held that 10-day moving average and moved back up higher. Would you say that the difference between these two candles would be that this looks like it's holding the 10 while the other one looks like it's slipping below the 20? Would that
Yeah,
be a
I
fair
would.
assessment?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. And I guess the one thing I would just add to that is, we are seeing a little bit of selling pressure in the tech world. And if I'm not mistaken, around that same time you just pointed out, I think we were still looking fairly
I'm strong.
strong.
Yeah.
So again, I think that that would be maybe just a little bit of the difference. We didn't have the rotation going on at that time per se.
Yeah. No, no, that's a very fair point. Very fair point. So, okay. So, we'll be watching this one, obviously, on your put radar there for AMZN. MicroStrategy, MSTR, Bitcoin's certainly been pretty volatile, which means MicroStrategy is going to be volatile. You can pretty much tell what Bitcoin's doing just by looking at MSTR. So, what is it that you're looking at from this one?
Yeah, I mean the Bitcoin rally over the weekend obviously put some of those names onto my radar on Sunday night, and just they had the stock split announced, and didn't really see a huge bump off of that, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe a little bit intraday action after the announcement, but just kind of a little bit under pressure. And then just kind of, the fuel, the fire of a potential stock split added in with a big rally of Bitcoin. It just seemed like it would probably gap up over both the 20 and the 50-day there. And, just one of those names when it gets the momentum going can be a pretty good candidate. And yeah, for me, yesterday, yeah, I missed that one. I don't know. I don't like chasing some of those gap ups on some of those big volatile names. And unfortunately, I wish I had because it pushed pretty higher for most of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Just trying a few things going on here, Brandon. All right. So, let's see. That was. Hold on a sec. So that was MicroStrategy, and then finally CMG on the radar here. This is one I know we had. This has got to be the worst post stock split name that I can recall seeing in at least 10 years. Really just had that action and now it's just been sliding lower. Certainly, some of these consumer discretionary names. I know the XLY is flying, but that's primarily Amazon and Tesla in that, which make up about 40% of that ETF. But some of the other names not performing as well, and restaurants have definitely been one of them. So a little bit of a descending triangle going on here, Brandon, on the daily. What is it that you're looking at on CMG?
Yeah, probably similar to some other traders out there. I know, Chart Trader was talking about it as well. I mean, it had that gap down in the 56 area, and yeah, again, just the slide that it saw, you got so close, just seemed like a good short term, put or short candidate being so close to that gap. And I think Chart Trader had said that it had filled today, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I mean, at this point, like you said, if I had to guess post stock split, I wouldn't have guessed it would have made this slide. I thought that people were going to be all over this thing at,
Yeah.
the new lower price, even though it doesn't necessarily mean anything. So I'm a little surprised. I think it'd be interesting to see what this one would have done if we hadn't seen so much pressure in the restaurant sector.
Yeah, yeah, it'll be one that we're watching there, and I don't know, maybe a lot of the money just floating into Kava too, right? I mean, it's interesting to see the price action, like we said, going in on this one. Kava, I know, also had been pulling back a little bit over the last week, but overall, pretty solid performance still for Kava there. It fell short of the 100 level, so I don't know. That's my take on it, Brandon. Maybe just more people going to Kava and think that Mediterranean's taking over from Mexican food, perhaps in people's wish list.
I mean, I did have Mediterranean last night. I would go to a cava if I had one over a Chipotle, but that's just me.
I still haven't been to a cava. Is it good? I've heard it's good.
There's none nearby me, so I haven't been either.
Okay. There's one right down the road from me. Maybe that'll be my dinner tonight. Um, so, uh, well, okay, so there's some of the names that you've had on your radar, just giving out some ideas there. But let's kind of pivot now, Brandon, and talk a little bit about today's talk's going to be the Thinkorswim, the Sizzle Index. So, why don't you talk to people about that? Obviously, we're going to spend some time on why it's important. What are some of the things that people should be looking at for the Sizzle Index? I know a lot of people use Thinkorswim there, and I suppose the next question is going to be for people who don't have Thinkorswim. What are other areas that you could get similar data for? But first, let's just focus in on the Sizzle Index on Thinkorswim.
Yes, so I figured after throwing out Sizzle Index so many times, there were probably people thinking that I was, talking about a dish at Kava. So figured I'd clarify that one, and that in conjunction with last week I had thrown out a couple of comments about some of the J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs option activity prior to earnings. So it just seemed like those two things combined would be a timely topic. So. Yeah, like I just said, use the term call or put sizzle index, and that comes right off of the Thinkorswim platform. So the sizzle index is just a ratio of the security's current options volume over that security's daily average options volume over the last 5 days. So if that sounded textbook, it's because I cut and pasted it directly from the Schwab website. So, um, so
Why
simply
reinvent the wheel, Brandon? Right?
I figured I would do things by the book and get their definition. Um, just simply put, if I say a stock is, at 2 on the call sizzle index, all that really means is that the current daily call options volume is 2 times that of its daily average. Um, we've talked about this, I think, since my very first call when Jim interviewed me, what feels like a long time ago. Unusual option activity must be taken with a grain of salt. So you don't always know if there might be some sort of big institution that's just hedging. Maybe it's a market maker that is unloading some risk. So the big option activity does not always equate to a big move per se, but I do think it helps paint the picture on the sentiment in the stock.
Um, for people who don't use this, where would you get the Sizzle Index? Where's the best place to find that?
Well, right in our own room there, every morning under the ticker symbol OPTNX for options trader, we do post some of the unusual options activity. For me, I usually try to scan this to see if any of the names I currently have on my watch list are popping up with some interesting activity. And sometimes I'll take a look at the names that are on there and just see if any of the charts at that time or I'm seeing anything interesting. So that's personally what I do. And then most brokers, I haven't used any other broker in a very long time, but most brokers that allow options trading, they should have some sort of information on the level of activity that's taking place in the options world that day.
Okay. So there you go. So see, so we covered this. You've talked several times about it. Again, taken with a grain of salt because of the potential for a big institution hedging. So then you, as you said, every morning you look at that option X just to get a list of names that could be playing. So, what are some things that will catch your eye in particular around this Sizzle Index? Like, what is it that you're looking for? You get your list of names, you're going in and you're double checking the charts. What are you looking for?
Yeah, so there are really two things that kind of catch my attention. One, something like the JP Morgan options activity prior to earnings that I had posted about. So this had a call sizzle index below one, a put sizzle index above two, and a put call ratio that almost hit one. So from my experience and just looking at a lot of these options chains prior to events and earnings, it's kind of rare to see a call sizzle index below one prior to earnings. So, I took that as just a little bit of a warning. Again, earnings in general are just kind of hard to figure out sometimes, and like I said, you sometimes got to take this option activity, cautiously. But at the end of the day, we did see, J.P. Morgan move lower. Interestingly enough, a couple days later, Goldman Sachs had basically the exact same type of activity on it, and that moved higher. But for me, I don't know, let's just say I was going to take a shot at some sort of event, or if I were going to play earnings, if I was kind of on the fence about it and I looked at like JP Morgan or, Goldman Sachs and I saw that kind of call activity or put activity, that might just maybe make me not take the trade and just say, you know what, Brandon, there's just do something else or just play it after earnings. So, that's kind of one way that I use it, just to sometimes the best trade is not taking one. So that's kind of how I look at that scenario. And then, I would note it might sound a little confusing here that you would think the put call ratio would maybe be a little bit higher based upon those numbers that I just gave. But the reason that it kind of comes skewed like that is on a regular basis, calls are generally speaking bought more than puts. So that what is the discrepancy there between the call and the put sizzle index. Um, the second thing that kind of catches my attention, and interpret this as you will, I guess. But one thing that I was told by the market maker that I had learned from is if you see unusual chunks of either calls or puts being bought in the last 5 minutes of trading. So again, I'm talking more like block trades that will get your attention. Those can be some of the most intriguing, unusual options activity to follow. So you've obviously got some risk here as you're kind of making a quick decision at the close, and it would entail, close or carrying that position overnight. But again, this was, I don't know, one of the tricks of the trade that he taught me.
All right. So, go into that a little deeper then, Brandon. Like, what would be a scenario that would have you looking for calls? What would be a scenario that would have you looking for puts? And how much does a closing price factor in then on this?
Yeah, so I mean, I would definitely, obviously I personally don't go scanning the last 5 minutes, just like looking for these big numbers. This would be more of a scenario of like, I don't know, let's
Do
just
you
take.
have do you have an alert set up on your Thinkorswim that will alert you to any call sizzle above uh, three or anything along those lines? Do you set parameters for it?
I do not. Mainly, I just
Can
find
you?
that, that's a good question. I actually do not know.
Okay.
I mean, Thinkorswim does have quite a few capabilities, but I don't know. For me, it's more, again, I don't necessarily go like seeking this stuff out. It more is like names that I'm watching and I happen to notice it throughout the day. Like you'll see me, throw out different technical alerts and ideas. Those are names that I happen to be watching, and then I happen to notice the options activity. So I'm not necessarily relying on it, but like kind of going back to your question, maybe something that I might be on the lookout for. Amazon, let's just use that as an example. Again, I'm not making any calls, but we have the Prime Day thing going on. Let's just say all of a sudden that thing faded and it was about to close at the low. The candle of the day was looking pretty bearish. All of a sudden we start moving below the 20-day, maybe some other major moving averages just for, illustrative purposes. And then all of a sudden I saw somebody, throwing in 500,000 block put purchases towards the end of the day. That's something that might catch my attention. That might be like, okay, well, maybe there's just a chance. We'll see, but maybe there's just a chance that Amazon comes out with an update and it's not quite the revenue of Prime Day that we wanted to see.
All right. Do you usually find it more often in names that like have earnings coming up, or maybe our M&A chatter or anything along those lines? I mean, because my assumption would be that there's the potential for a fundamental event coming on if I saw that sort of activity at the end of the day. Is that kind of how you look at it, or not so much?
Yeah, that's more of how I would look at it. Nvidia's got a investor day, Amazon's got Prime Day, some sort of fundamental event. And then I guess there's always those scenarios where you're just watching a stock and you just, again, you see that unusual option activity and just kind of out of nowhere. Again, those can potentially be the most intriguing, but, again, you just never know what's on the other side of the table. So, maybe if you see something like that and, you're just sitting there and, actually, you were talking about Uber earlier. Uber, I think it was like a couple years back at this point. They had kind of come out randomly and they had updated their guidance, and the stock just absolutely soared after hours. And I looked at the options chain after, and the call sizzle index was at like 8 for the day. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, right.
So, maybe if there's a name like that you're watching and you just see something out of nowhere, that can be intriguing. And if you see that and you want to take a shot at it, consider it a lotto. That's kind of how I would potentially trade it. Don't bet the farm on it, but if you see something that's intriguing, you like the chart setup and you want to take an overnight shot, just keep it small and know that you might be wrong.
All right. So, you talk about your methodology a lot. You go through 200 charts a night, just kind of looking for different setups. Um, when you see something that catches your eye, is this one of the steps that you take, the call sizzle, just to kind of get a feeling for how much it's in play?
Yeah, so the way that I handle that, so for me, everything starts with the charts. Sometimes I might see some of this activity as I'm looking through some options chains and stuff, and maybe that will throw something on my radar. But for me, everything really starts with the charts. So, like you said, I'm looking through all of my usual traders every night, and I usually narrow it down to roughly call it 10 call and 10 put ideas. So if we're in a strong trending market, I might adjust those accordingly, and maybe I'll only have an idea or two for my back pocket on the counter trend side. Just we've all seen it, just in case we get one of those days where we get the pullback or some sort of geopolitical headline or whatever it might be. And then once I've got that narrowed down, I go through all of the 20 names after that, and I look at the option activity from the day. And if something sticks out, maybe I'll move that towards the top of my list for the next day. So, personally, I just like to take this approach because, that way I'm relying on the price action from the chart and I'm not speculating on the option activity. But at the same time, you always have maybe that potential boost of, maybe something's on the way, maybe some news is coming, and it gives your trade a little bit of a boost. But for me, I just personally like to start by relying on the chart and the price action over the option activity.
All right, so there you have it. So, Brandon, anything else on the sizzle index then?
No, I think we just about covered it. Again, I just kind of reiterate. Always take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. I've mentioned this before, but I've seen stocks sometimes that have been sitting at 10 on the call sizzle index and they've, gone down 3% the next day. And I've seen stocks at 10 on the call sizzle index and they've gone up 15% the next day. So, again, just kind of take all the activity with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I think it can just be kind of another tool in the toolbox when you're trying to figure out, stock and overall market movements.
All right. I'm just curious if people are able. I just pulled everybody out to the notes. I'm going to be playing around with this again. We're playing around with the recording too, so hopefully everyone's able to see this. But all the notes from the discussion that we had with Brandon should be out there. I'm going to again play around with it to make sure that everyone can get their eyeballs on it. But yeah, thank you, Jay. Anybody that's able to tell us, can you see this? You should be able to toggle back and forth between the charts with this. And I'll look for a way to get it in a little bit more of a permanent space here. So again, just kind of playing, just working with this. Um, we had a call with the team that runs this page. So nice. Okay, good, good, good. Everybody's seen that. All right, Brandon. Well, we'll let you get back to trading over there. I'm going to play around with these charts. Uh, Again, you should be able to toggle back to the charts. I'll get you these notes, and hopefully this recording worked, Brandon. Right?
Yeah, no, hopefully, and I'm looking at the notes, and yeah, no, I like this. I guess I better spend double the time on it now that we've got it all written out on what I'm watching here. So,
Well,
hit me.
and the charts and the charts you could figure out. I just figured that I could kind of put a window in as we went along there. So again, it's a work in progress, new system, but it should be a lot better than that. A transcript of the recorded meow. I don't think that that's a function that we have, but again, we will be pointing out to. We should be posting the recording if you wanted to give it another listen to. So we'll see about the transcript, but I don't think that that's in the cards, unfortunately. All right, Brandon, I'll let you get going on your end and we'll talk soon.
All right, thanks, Gavin. Take care.
Okay, bye bye.